Hello, everyone. So today I would like to give a lecture about modernization and post-war development in South Korea and Japan from a comparative perspective. Now, I'm very sorry for uploading this video very late because I'm attending a conference in Seoul, and actually I'm a host of the global conference uh, today. So I had to come to Seoul and give a lecture via videos. So sorry about that. But I promise that this lecture will be also very interesting and exciting too. So why the modernization is important? Main question for the week is this: how were Western countries developed, and what's the Westerners' view on East Asian miracle? It took more than 100 or 200 years in Western Europe or North America to be developed. So Western countries actually took a lot of time or a lot of years to develop their country. But in East Asia, right, we call the East Asian miracle growth as a miraculous economy. So how could East Asian countries achieved this kind of a miracle? There are some Westerners' perspective, Westerners' interpretation of the East Asian miracle, but at the same time, there are some different version of explanation. Um, Japanese people, Korean people, and Four Little Dragons actually interpret the success of East Asia somewhat differently from Westerners' perspective. So I would like to compare these kind of different perspectives and this different interpretation of the East Asian miracle, including Korean miracle and Japanese miracle. So first, we will begin with the concept of modernity. I will explain why the concept of modernity is very important. And then we'll move to the first Japanese miracle because I'm touching the Japanese case first because Japan was modernized first. And then I will talk about the Korean miracle too. Most the dominant theory about these two countries and East Asian countries, a miracle was explained by this developmental state theory. So we will explore what the developmental state means and what are the core elements of developmental state theory in explaining East Asian miracle. Now, let's recap the last week's theory. Well, we touched the strong state model in explaining the East Asian miracle. I mean, the politics and the society of East Asian countries, including Korea and Japan. And the strong state model has been quite dominant in explaining the country's politics and society. And the other one is alternative explanation is strong society model and political and social forces, which is stronger than conventional wisdom. And third perspective is that it is true that Japan, Korea has a strong society, strong state, but at the same time, sorry here, typo, strong society. But at the same time, these countries also have strong society too. Look at Korean case. People actually pour into the street and demonstrate every day, like Paris of the France, right? So how can we understand properly the Korean politics, Japanese politics, or Singapore politics, and so forth? So let's begin with the strong state model. The evidence of the strong state model is like this. You can see the major players in politics. It seems bureaucrats are key players in the game of strong state model. And while the politicians, business, and interests could play a crucial role in strong society model against the bureaucratic state. The third one, strong state and strong society model. Bureaucrats and politicians and economic world actually share power between themselves. And major advocates, Chalmers Johnson, T.J. Pempel, and Franco Alpam actually support this strong state model. And Rosenbluth and Ramsayer at Harvard, Kent Calder at Johns Hopkins support this kind of strong society model. Lastly, Richard Samuels at Cornell University support the strong state and strong society model. The other category is the how did major actors dominated politics? How in strong state model, how bureaucrats actually dominated domestic politics? It is explained by scholars that say that during the Japanese occupation period, and there was a reform of the government, and bureaucrats played a crucial role in reforming the government organizations. And also, the government during the development period, in case of Japan, there was a strong implementation of the industrial policy, which was made by the bureaucrats at the MITI. But instead, in strong society model's case, competition among politicians, bureaucrats, businesses, and interest groups were fierce. LDP, National Assembly members actually was able to check the rise of bureaucrats in electoral politics. And big businesses also played a crucial role by providing funding and exercising their economic power over society. There is also evidence of the strong state and strong society model. Richard Samuels actually believed that there was a kind of a constant negotiation between the bureaucrats and the other business associations and other social actors. And also he found that the business associations provide the advice to the bureaucrats frequently, and there was a kind of a reciprocal consent. You don't need to say details about your needs, but bureaucrats understand what you need. That kind of logic was adopted by the Richard Samuels. I'm not saying some theory is wrong, but all theory has a kind of a valid point you may have to remember. The other evidence is under the strong state model, it says that bureaucrats were too powerful so that they could find new jobs after retirement. We call it amakudari. So if you have worked at the central ministries, right? If you age reach like a 55, 56, you retire early and find a new job in the local government, public enterprises, and private enterprises. Your experience as a former central bureaucrat is very, very powerful. And actually, another important evidence is that 90% of law, which was supposed to be made by the National Assemblyman, right? But in Japan and Korea, more than 90% of the laws has been drafted by bureaucrats. And now Korea has dropped to 40%, but still, during the heyday of bureaucracy, 90% of the law were passed by bureaucrats. According to the strong society model, there was no existence of non-trade sector. How could the state protected non-trade sector if government is so powerful, right? So this theory actually suggests that social sector was very strong. Farmers Association was very, very strong. So government had no choice but to support the agricultural sector, right? Or protect the non-trade sector. Under the strong state and strong society model, you can find that Jaikai is in Chinese character, business world. Business evidence under the strong state and strong society model is that financial the business world frequently have had an informal meeting with the central bureaucrats, in particular Ministry of Trade, MITI, Ministry of International Trade and Industry, or Ministry of Foreign Finance. They had this business world actually had a frequent meeting and exchanged ideas as well as the information. So this evidence support strong state, strong society model. What was the consequence of this dominance? Under the bureaucratic state, of course, civil society's power was very, very weak. and politicians were not powerful at all. Under the strong society model, there were a strong labor movement or a strong farmers movement, so that they can pose a threat to a state bureaucrat. Under the strong state and strong society model, you could cooperate with each other. So there were these kind of evidences, but at the same time, you can find some several counter evidences too. One of the counter evidence to the opponents to strong state model is that bureaucrats exercise a great enormous power, although the bureaucracy is quite small. Indeed, the size of bureaucracy in Japan and Korea and Southeast Asia are quite small compared to other nations. Strong society model actually, these groups actually highlight that lifetime tenure, right? Lifetime tenure means that unlike the explanation from the strong society model, they believe that the politicians, businesses, and interest groups are powerful, are not bureaucrats, but actually bureaucrats actually enjoy the lifetime tenure employment. So this gives an edge to bureaucrats, so that it can be very threatful to society model. So counter evidences. Strong state and strong society model. What would be the counter evidence? Would be this model. Actually, this model is not the dominant model. It provides some important evidences to readers. So still, we couldn't find some relevant, counter evidences here. So these two are dominant opinion in Japanese and Korean politics. So if you're not satisfied with this kind of existing theories, you may find some alternative theories. All three models were suggested in explaining Japan's and Korea's success in post-war development in terms of the politics, economy, and society. Some people actually adopt strong state model, strong society model, or mixed model, right? But at least all three models provided some explanatory power to Japan's and Korea's success in post-war development, in particular from 1950 to 1980s. Possible question will be like this: is still bureaucrats powerful in contemporary politics? How would you answer this question? Is this still powerful bureaucrats? What about this? Is domestic economy still governable in the age of globalization? Right? And third question will be: do industrial policies or centralized banking system work? So remember, these Asian countries actively use this industrial policies and then centralized banking system. Well, Japan and Korea still manage decentralized banking, so there is a national bank, but industrial policies, at least in Korea, government's industrial policy exercise of industrial policies are still out there, but the influence is declining actually. So industrial policies are still working, but after the IMF crisis in 1998, government tried to intervene in the this kind of discussion a bit quite far. Stay away from this kind of discussions. Understand? Why are there so many social organizations serving the elders? So if you say, for example, right, if you say, government is that powerful and bureaucrats play a crucial role in governing the nation, why they couldn't reach to the social level, and why there are so many social organizations serving elders locally, right? This evidence support that bureaucrats are not that powerful these days. right? There are many alternative theories today because emphasizing the strong state is quite old theories. They imagine the old days of the East Asian countries and describe the power relationship. So look at this kind of evidences. You know, if people believe that Japanese bureaucracy is still powerful, you may ask this kind of question: is Japanese bureaucracy still powerful even after the LDP lost to DPJ, Democratic Party Japan? So Hatoyama became the prime minister of Japan in 2009, and it was a quite shocking election. So the Hatoyama, the Democratic Party leader in Japan, actually um, one of actually campaigned during the 2009 electoral campaign. So main campaign pledge was this. What was this? Breaking down the bureaucratic dominance. I think as an opposition leader, you need to have some kind of evidences to advocate your argument, right? So, as the opposition party leader, Hatoyama Yukio actually emphasized that, oh, we will break down this bureaucratic dominance. The bureaucrats are too powerful, so that we can break the terror affairs, tear down these bureaucratic connections. But what happened? You may ask this kind of question: what is the implication of this campaign? So if your central election theme is breaking down the bureaucratic dominance, we can actually see this kind of scene from a different angle. It is actually evidence to support that bureaucrats are still powerful, and that's why Hatoyama Yukio actually pledged this kind of premises, breaking down the bureaucratic dominance. This is a kind of an opposite. Is the evidence that the bureaucrats still dominate Japanese politics. So, what is the implication of this campaign? You may think about this kind of question. We may begin our slide with this kind of question: how could Western countries actually modernize their countries? Then you must know what modernization means, right? So, Western world actually experienced a very similar process of modernization from 17th to 19th century. They modernized in many ways, and the process was actually replicable among the many countries. So economically, we mean modernization, that new mode of production, technological innovation, right? New mode of commercial activities and institution. So, during the pre-modern period, industrial tools and massive production was not possible because there was no innovation. One man did everything. Mass production, rise of banks, mass production, new capitalism, high investment in this, etc., etc., and all economic evidence of modernization. Politically, before pre-modern society, you lived under the king, but the evidence of modernization in Western world means that you now have a republic. Introduction of the modern democratic systems, removal of the monarchy system except the symbolic king, universal suffrage, everyone can vote. Until 1920, U.S. citizens, females, couldn't vote. Right? This was a very important advancement. Equal participation in politics. Everyone could, even slave, they could participate. That is the sign of political modernization. And value of human rights were, well respected by your society. That means your country started to belong to the modernized world. Socially, a removal of the social class system like India's caste system, rise of new social groups like a labor class, middle class, and so forth, new merchant class emergence. That is the sign of modernization of the world socially. Social cluster, urban community, development of the urbanity. That is also all signs of modernization. It happened from 17th century to 19th century. So this happened. This is what happened during the modernization period in Western society. So massive productions, the introduction of machines, use of energies, and so forth. This kind of a development actually pushed some new merchant class. So this is a sign of economic modernization. But this kind of economic modernization is didn't stop there. It also influenced the politics and society, right? So this is the scene of modernization. Then you must ask a question. Then what happened in East Asia? Before we do that, you must differentiate the concept of market economy and planned economy. So the German sociologist, actually Max Weber, explained this difference between the market economy and planned economy very well. The reason why I'm comparing these two is because Western society, the UK, US economy, for example, is quite based on the market economy. But there are different sides of the economy. We call it planned economy. So, for example, market economy, the role of government is just the state role is actually managing and regulating the market, but not deeply stepping in. But planned economy, government actually intervene in the market. So regulatory state means that you set up the rule, and make sure market function properly. So that is the role of the regulatory state. But here, on the planned economy, state actually intervene in the market. You can adjust the interest rate, exchange rate, and so forth, or provide the subsidies to businesses and so forth, right? On the market economy is because this economy based on the supply and demand curve. You don't need to step in, and you don't need to use industrial policies. But planned economy, because state intervene frequently, it depends on higher level of industrial policy, because state has a strategic goals and to nurture domestic economy, right? Being a bureaucrat, is government service actually prestigious? Not really. In Western world, they try to get a job in the private sector first, and public sector job is not that popular. But in planned economy, because who implement industrial policies, who intervene? Yes, it's a bureaucrats. Bureaucrats, so in these societies, are very powerful. So they are well educated and trained, and most capable person in that particular country. So this is a very prestigious job. Confucian world, being a bureaucrat is a family honor. Market economy, is very sensitive to external environment. For example, if U.S. FDR, Federal Reserve Bank, actually changed the interest rate, Japan and China and the Southeast Asia were heavily influenced because their market is very, very sensitive. Market economy is very sensitive to external threat. But planned economy, because government actually step in and control the domestic market, domestic economy, you don't need to worry about the external threat. Not that sensitive. So this is the difference between the market economy and planned economy. In this context, the World Bank in 1993 published a book, very famous book, East Asian Miracle. So World Bank actually analyzed the East Asian Miracle from their perspective, and which is very market-oriented explanation, market perspective. So according to World Bank, they represent a Western perspective, market theorist. They focused on the market economic factors in explaining East Asian miracle. Okay, they actually adopted market principles. So according to the World Bank view, East Asia could be successful because there was a massive private domestic investment, and East Asian miraculous economy successfully grew human capital, better educated labor forces actually entered the market, and there were high level of domestic savings level, more than 30%. Singapore was 55% on average. The people of these countries actually save a lot of money, and central bank actually could save us money to reinvest the businesses. Otherwise, central bank don't have money to support the domestic industries, right? Fourth, government was very efficient. Singapore government. Imagine the Singapore government and Japanese bureaucrats and the Korean bureaucrats. They were relatively clean and nationalistic and very educated. And also, there was a government intervention, but unlike the planned economic theorists, industrial policies were exceptionally worked in a way that they conform the market principles. So although they used some government policies, they were not against the market principles. Okay, and finally, from the World Bank perspective, East Asian economy was back then, environment was very favorable to international conditions. This was happened during this. So this happened according to the World Bank. East Asia was a faithful student of the market economy, so that they could achieve the tremendous economic success. That's the Westerners' perspective, and the World Bank's view actually represent this kind of perspective, although they briefly talked about the governmental policies. What do you think about it? Do you agree with this kind of argument? We will see. We will see in coming slides. So, against this kind of a market theorist perspective or the modernization theories or Westerners' perspective, let's take a look at the detail of the Japan's and Korea's modernization process. Let's test whether market theory is right or not, right? With the case of Japan and South Korea and East Asian countries. So let's begin with the starting point of modernization here. As you can see, the Emperor Meiji's clothes, the modernization symbol of modernization is like this. They changed everything. They changed the lifestyle. They changed the mode of production. They introduced the human rights concept. So let's begin with the Japan's starting point of modernization. Japan's path was this. The foundation of the modernization in Japan actually started from the Meiji Restoration, with the rise of Meiji Restoration from 1868 to 1912. During this Meiji Restoration period, meritocracy. So no matter what your background, your connection to political powerhouse, no matter what your parents' job, you will be evaluated by your own merit only. That kind of principle was adopted. That's the symbol of the recruitment principle in modern society. Only evaluated by your own merits. Self-made success was possible. Rational and reward-based society Japan became after modernization during this period. And Meiji Constitution was adopted, the fascist constitution. And the social equity concept, like human rights against the discrimination by removing social classes, were introduced by the Meiji constitutions, and samurai classes were removed as well. And cabinet system, modern cabinet system was actually introduced. So we call it Naigaku, modern cabinet system. So inside the government, modern ministers system was introduced. For example, this guy actually is in charge with the foreign affairs. This guy is in charge with the welfare, or this guy actually focus on the finance or economic development, or national defense, right? And there was a reform of the civil servants. During the unlike the pre-modern system, Meiji system actually is introduced the Western style education system, and modern bureaucrats during this period actually were mostly from Tokyo Imperial University. Tokyo Imperial University. And interestingly, the former warriors, samurai class, actually entered this kind of Tokyo Imperial University and educated in modern way, and later on become they become the bureaucrats. And there were a privy council. There were a bunch of senior advisors. They were all the powerhouse. But during this major restoration, they become the member of the senior advisor groups. And also from the social perspective, there was spread of the Western style and culture, as you can see in this Meiji's cloth. Secondly, in terms of the economy and early industrialization, the government, state actually protected the domestic economy. That means, you promote the domestic economy, but at the same time, you ban the foreign imports, right? So, this kind of protection of domestic industry was possible because there was a centralized banking system, and this centralized national bank provided subsidies to domestic industries. Now, under the WTO system, this kind of practice is not possible because that will be against the WTO regulations. But at that time, providing subsidies to domestic industry and nurturing specific industry was possible under this kind of protection system. And the national leaders actually encouraged the savings and people to save more money and saving to banks and trust and cartels, and the national banks actually utilized that money for supporting domestic industries. And during this period, Meiji Restoration period, family-owned big corporations, we call it Jaibatsu were emerged, and there was an international division of labor. During the early Meiji period, early industrialization period, Japanese firms actually heavily focused on the textile industry or labor-intensive industry, low-skill industry. But later on, government intentionally pushed the heavy industries like automobiles and shipbuilding and so forth, right? So from 1945 to 1952, Japan was also hit by the World War II, but so this period is considered as an economic reconstruction period. But from 1952 to 1973, with support from the U.S. and Korean War, Japan experienced economic miracle. And there was a bit of the economic recession because of the oil crisis in the late 1970s, and Japanese economy started to decline. So heyday of Japanese economic miracle was this period. And government actually, as I mentioned earlier, as you can see, the planned economy, right? Government actually took the initiative in supporting the domestic industries. Government actually, MOF, MITI, Ministry of International Trade and Industry and Ministry of Finance bureaucrats intentionally pushed textile labor-intensive industry to heavy industry, right? In 1888, government actually deregulated light industry to private sector. So private sector started to benefit by this kind of government actions and benefit this kind of action, liquidizing the giving power to private sector actually benefited the Jaibatsu groups, family-owned businesses, by reducing the low initial cost. Reducing the initial cost. That means, government by using its budget, create the automobile, right? And nurture this automobile company. But later on, liquidize these national firms to private sector at cheaper price. Then from private sector perspective, you don't need to actually invest a lot of money in the beginning. If in the beginning you have to invest in the recruiting new people, technicians, as well as you have to build the factories, right? But this time you didn't need to spend a lot of money on initial industrialization stage. That benefit goes to Jaibatsu, big family-owned industries. So from this moment, there was a kind of a speedy creation of the industrialization. So Japan's economy transformed from the low-wage industry to fast conversion to heavy industry. So you heard about this Jaibatsu big conglomerates, right? And the Mitsui, Sumitomo, and this kind of companies actually belongs to big conglomerates, Toyota, right? So you heard about these kind of names. They were originally started from this kind of a Meiji restoration. They got a very, very big benefit from the state government. Yasuda is also a big conglomerate. So let's talk about the Korea's modernization. Now, let's test the Westerners' perspective with the Korean example as well. Starting point of the modernization in Korea was like this. In 1884, there were a group of people, Enlightenment movement, right? This a group of people were more heavily motivated by the success of Japan, and so that the following of the opening of Japan to Western trade and modernization, a group of reformers in Korea actually sought to initiate rapid changes within Korea along the similar lines. But the power of reformers were very weak, and back then Korea was heavily dominated by the Confucian scholars, strong nationalists. So this kind of attempts, Kapshin coup, actually failed. Instead, because of this kind of failure, Korea Joseon dynasty eventually failed to modernize during this period, and there was a Japan annexation. Korea actually merged into Japanese colonialism from 1910 to 1945. So Korea's economic development actually from this period actually differed from Japanese case. Korea's economic modernization started from the exporting agricultural product to Japan. It was not a second industry manufacture. Second, basically Korea's economic development actually depended upon low-wage industry until 1960s. Okay, it was quite different from Japan. Japanese case, if you remember, family-owned Jaibatsu groups actually started from the heavy industries, right? So if you look at this graph, Korea's economy actually very influenced by the Japanese economic miracle too. If you look at these Japan's data, the GDP per capita was like this, but during the World War II, Japan's GDP growth actually dropped like this. Korea's example. Korea actually similarly followed the Japanese model, but at the same time, they experienced the economic backwardness during the same period, right? So the pattern is very similar. That means Japanese economy and Korean economy is so very similar because Korea was under the control of the Japanese colonialism, right? Starting point of the modernization. Second, I think U.S. government's foreign aid fund until 1960s was kind of a great resource for South Korea's modernization. What could Korean business do during the Japanese colonial period and the early, right after the Korean War? There was nothing. So U.S. foreign aid fund actually helped Korean economy greatly. And military regime focused on the two parties industries, two parts of industries. For example, military regime actually started from 1961. So, for example, textile industry like Japan, they actually copycat. They were copycat, emulated Japanese economic development, and also pushed the progressive millionaires who became the future chaebol. For example, this was the founder of Hyundai Automobiles. He started from the Hyundai construction companies. Later on, he created Hyundai shipbuilding, which were pushed by the military government. This was the first car produced by the Hyundai Pony. So his nickname is Pony Jung. He's the Jung Ju-young, the founder of Hyundai Group. And this was Samsung's earlier logo. Now it's become the famous company globally, right? Samsung, Hyundai, Lucky Gold Star, which is LG right now, Sangyong. These companies actually started from the modernization period in Korea. And also the introduction of the modern political institutions, which was mainly inherited from Japanese system and U.S. system, like a presidency plus a prime minister system actually was introduced, and that was the kind of a starting point of the political modernization in Korea. Look at these pictures. Before modernization, Korean people still wearing this like a traditional clothes, but started to change over time. Korean females were not educated, under the Confucian tradition, but they started to go to the schools during from this modernization period. And could you see the changes? They started to wear the modern style, Western style clothes. They also cut their hair as well. Like they used to have these kind of things, right? So Koreans' lifestyle also has been changed since the modernization period. During the tie with the United States, I mentioned that the foreign aid fund from the United States were kind of a great resource for economic rehabilitation of South Korea, and this kind of moment actually, Koreans people had a strong tie to Korea. So this is when the Douglas MacArthur actually came to Korean Peninsula during the Korean War. They welcomed from heartfelt welcome. They expressed their heartfelt appreciation to U.S. military. So this is a quite recent one. Still people believe that Korea-U.S. tie is the only way diplomatically that Korea can survive. So whenever they demonstrate against the North Korean invasion or North Korean missile test, they always bring this U.S. flag, right? So this was the first president, Lee Seung-man, and he met the Commander Douglas MacArthur during the Korean War. So this is kind of a symbolic picture that shows the close relationship between the U.S. and the Korean government. Then what would the sources of economic miracle? We can think about that. Japan's economic miracle. Sources of Japanese miracle were kind of contested. Was it a triumph of the market forces, or there were some specific circumstances like U.S. relations, global economic situation? No miracle argument. There's a no miracle theory. Japan's actually economic growth was based on the market principles, right? They believe that there was no miracle. They just faithfully follow the market principles, and the environment was quite favorable to Japanese economic growth, like a close relationship with the United States and global economic situation were favorable to Japanese economic growth. It was not miracle at all. What There's also some revisionist, right? Against this kind of a market forces, advocates of market forces. The revisionists actually argue that no, there was a miracle, but the sources of the economic miracle was a state-led process, industrial policy. Government actually chose which industry to nurture, and they invested a lot of money on selected industries, coordinated market economy, right? I'm sorry.